Welcome to the Executive Branch Review. It's been a long day, but you guys were asking for it, so I'm going to give it to you. A little Executive Branch Review today. I should post something online with the 7 topics, but there's about 7 topics we need to go over. But look who I got. A little buddy right here. I know what you're thinking. I bet you think it's a Jigglytooth, but it's not. No, we got Jigglypoof. This is no Jigglytooth. This is Mr. Narwhal. You might be thinking narwhals are supposed to have horns. This guy had a rough life, okay? So just give him a little bit of slack. He's here to help you out, okay? We don't need to comment on whether he's got a horn or not. So we got Mr. Narwhal here. We got Pork over here, just chilling like a villain. And we're going to talk a little bit about the president, right? So look at the president. The first thing we kind of left off with Congress and then the president, and they're kind of like always going to be together. So one thing that we like to talk about would be the number one constitutional conflict between the president and Congress, which is war. All right, so we talked about the War Powers Act. You need to know what it is, but essentially the president used to go and just send troops all over the place. Didn't care, just said yep, go over there, go invade. And Congress was powerless to stop it because the only thing they could do is really cut funding. But you're not going to cut funding to our troops. So in 1973, they wrote this thing called the War Powers Act of 1973 to stop the president from doing this. The War Powers Act of 1973 does 3 things. Number 1, the president's got to notify Congress within 48 hours. Number 2, the president can deploy troops 60 to 90 days. And then number 3, Congress, within the first 60 to 90 days, has to approve. If they don't approve of the president's deployment, then they got 60 to 90 days to come back. So those are the 3 things, the War Powers Act. Why do we have it? It was to stop the president from abusing his war powers. Obviously, this was vetoed by President Nixon, but then Congress overrode the veto, so we have it in place now. So the War Powers Act is a real thing. It happens now. So there you go. Secondly, formal powers of the president. You guys, if you don't know the formal powers of the president right now, we're in trouble. Right treaties, domestic. Let's go with foreign. Right treaties, appoint foreign ambassadors. They're the commander-in-chief. Those are some foreign powers the president has. Some domestic would be they can veto laws, they can pardon criminals, they appoint Supreme Court justices. That leaves a lasting legacy. Understand Supreme Court justices are going to serve for life or good behavior, so it's a lasting legacy. They're going to serve well beyond the president's term. Those are, kind of the big ones. If I miss something, then you can go and find it. There's like 8, 9 of them. Just go memorize them. You'll be fine. The president does not declare war. Okay, and even though the president can and does nominate cabinet members and the Senate approves them, that's not constitutional. Okay, so those 2 things aren't constitutional. State of the Union is. Informal powers are the things that we need to focus on because we haven't really taught that yet until this unit. So informal powers, there's 3 big ones that start with the executive order, executive agreement, executive privilege. Executive order is a rule or regulation passed by the president that has the effect of a law. A rule or regulation passed by the president has the effect of the law. It's how the president kind of gets around this idea that the only thing he can do with legislation is veto it. So he writes his own executive orders. Now, this isn't like a carte blanche thing. It's not like he can just do this and keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger like old Jigglypoof here and just freaking dominate the world afterwards, because he can't do that because there are 2 checks on an executive order. And that would be the Supreme Court can rule it unconstitutional and Congress doesn't have to fund it. Yeah. Those are some checks. So there you go. And then the executive agreement, that is a foreign policy type thing, and it's agreement between 2 heads of state. So we got Mr. Narwhal, who's in charge of Narwhal World. Horns or no horns, everyone's accepted there. It's very nice of you, Mr. Narwhal. And then we got Jigglypoof, home of some whatever freaking Pokemon world is called, Pokeland, right? And they make an agreement between each other. They don't need the Senate to agree to it, okay? It's an agreement between 2 heads of state. Now, understand this. It expires when the president leaves office, so when he's gone, I didn't catch him. When he's gone, it's done, and also Congress doesn't have to fund it. But don't tell me that it has to do with the Supreme Court can rule unconstitutional because it's a foreign power. It's a foreign agreement. They really don't have that jurisdiction. So 2 checks on an executive agreement, expires when the president leaves office. Congress doesn't have to fund it. Then you have executive privilege. That's the right to privacy. That's the right that anything that's said in the White House between executive officials stays there. Okay, what happens in the White House stays in the White House. That's this idea of privacy, that the president can conduct business without having to worry about everyone listening to what he has to say. Now understand, this executive privilege does have some checks on it, right? Nixon versus United States says executive privilege does not extend to criminal matters. So if the president was involved in a crime, and we find out about it and we have probable cause, we get a warrant, and we can listen to those tapes and we can listen to those conversations. So Clinton versus United States says that executive privilege does not deal with personal matters, and then Nixon versus Fitzgerald says that you can't sue the president for what he does in office. So those are three big informal powers. But to me, maybe the biggest informal power of them all is this power of persuasion, this bully pulpit, going public. You can use all three of those terms to describe the fact that the president can get on television and he can talk to the masses. And if he can get the masses on his side, then Congress is going to pretty much do whatever he wants to do. And so that's a huge, huge power, because if you get the people on your side, you can do whatever you want. You don't need executive orders, executive agreements. You can make Congress do it. You can say, Congress, you're going to write this law because everyone loves it. Or Congress, you're going to make this treaty because everyone loves it. And then you can go through the formal powers that way. So those are the informal powers of the president, those three big ones that start with executive, and then bully pulpit, power of persuasion, going public, all of that's the same thing. What else do we need to talk about? I wrote it back here, but you guys can't read it because it's chicken scratch. The president. Okay, it's not just the president. The executive branch, the largest branch of the government. So when we're looking at the executive branch, we need to make sure we know about a few people in the executive branch, like the vice president. He does nothing. Vice president is worthless. He does two things: breaks a tie and takes over when the president dies. Both of those things don't happen very often. I know what you're saying. Well, coach, homeboy just broke a tie like a week ago. Relax. It's like the first time in a very long time. It kind of made me look like a liar, but trust me, it doesn't happen a lot. But it did happen, yes, and that's the vice president's job, constitutional duty. Break a tie, take over when the president leaves. Other than that, he's just kind of there. You're selected as a vice president to get votes for the president during the campaign. They balance the ticket. So the vice president is not informing the president who is. It's the White House staff. The White House staff is the number one advising group to the president. They're his personal friends. If you want to know if someone's in the White House staff, they're either going to have like a logistical name like chef or maid or secretary or something like that, or they're going to have an advisor next to their name. Okay, so the foreign policy advisor, that's a White House staff member. So White House staff, it's not the cabinet. Everyone thinks it's the cabinet, but the cabinet is not the number one advising group to the president, because sometimes they go native. They are a bureaucratic agency, but a lot of times they go native, which means they trust their own beliefs and behaviors over the president's. And so that's going native, and that is... the cabinet does that. So they're not the number one advising group to the president. Like I said, I'm running on fumes here. It's been a long day. I got to get this done. What else are we talking about today? We got the bureaucracy, White House staff. Oh yeah, bureaucrats. Okay. So why is the executive branch the largest branch of the government? I'll let you guys discuss that real quick. It's because they have to implement the laws of our nation. And we have millions of laws. That means we're going to have millions of bureaucrats. We do have millions of bureaucrats. Millions of people work for the executive branch. The postal worker works for the executive branch. He's implementing a law. That law came in the Constitution. But he still works for the executive branch. Okay? And the whole job of a bureaucrat is to implement the laws of America. And that's really, really easy if the laws are specific. But Congress doesn't like to give specific laws. They like to give broad policy goals and let the bureaucrats implement them as they see fit. Two reasons they do this. Number one, specialization. Bureaucrats are highly specialized. Aeronautical engineers are in the FAA. You would want aeronautical engineers writing little regulations about planes more so than you want Congress doing that. Okay, so you got that going on, and you also have they can shift blame, because if a plane goes down, we don't blame Congress, we blame the FAA or the pilot. Okay. So two reasons why Congress makes bureaucracy very powerful: by giving them broad policy goals, specialization, and they can shift blame. Now, when they give broad policy goals, they allow the bureaucrats to fill in the blanks. That's called rulemaking. They're making these like little rules and regulations. Like one of the regulations the FCC has come up with is there's 7 words you can't say on radio or television. I'm not going to say them here, but they're out there. And if you say that, you get fined. Congress didn't write that. Congress just told the FCC to keep us safe from bad words, and the FCC wrote that regulation. Okay? So that is what the bureaucracy does. It implements the laws, but it becomes a much bigger deal when the laws are broad. It gives them a lot of power to kind of write their own rules and regulations to implement the law. So the bureaucracy, that's what they do. They're very, very powerful. Some people say because they can write laws and execute the laws, so legislative power, executive power, they're actually violating separation of powers. You could have that conversation at a Supreme Court level if you wanted to. What else do we need to know about the bureaucracy? Oh, how do you want to become a bureaucrat? You want to become me? I'm a state bureaucrat. You can become me if you want to. But it used to be a spoil system, meaning that if somebody one of your friends won, then they got to fill all of the positions. But now it's a merit system, so you gotta have to take a test. And I'm gonna stop there, and we're gonna pick up in a minute. I'm gonna do 2 videos this time. It's nuts. So you guys watch this. It's 10 minutes. I'll do another 5-minute one in a second. Thanks.